So the next video we're going to react to is one from a woman whose channel is named Universe Trip. She usually does a lifestyle or makeup videos, and then sometimes she talks about Egypt, which is obviously what I'm more interested in. I didn't really watch the rest of her channel when it came to the other stuff. And so let's get into a bit of her videos. This is going to be a bit of a long video.
Hey y'all, I'm back. It's been a while, but I'm back with another video. And I'm scrolling through this article. And I'll post the link below in the video, in the description. And it says the article's title is Egypt unveils tomb still bursting with color after 4,300 years.
So what we have here is somebody who, and I love what her takes on Egypt, is going to talk about the dark complexion that is seen in ancient Egypt, which is one of the perfect things. But there's two things that I notice on here, which also jumps at me as interesting outside of how dark skinned these people paint themselves. And of course, you can see they have tufts for beard. You know, people say, oh, ancient Egyptians never ever painted themselves with beards, but they did paint themselves with beards, just never Middle Eastern style beards. You can see here, but I'll get back to this as well. I just gave away one of them.
And when I look at the tombs and the pictures, the people are also dark.
Hope the music in the back doesn't get copyrighted. But yes, if we look at this image, there is something to be said about how dark these people are, which, of course, one of the things that a lot of people like to point out is that, oh, yeah, they portray themselves as red and red and red. And a lot of people have always said that that red is supposed to resemble brown. Like, they don't think that they were red. They understand that they were brown. And you can see when they do portray themselves as very brown, that the red and brown are basically the same thing. And in fact, a lot of the time, the red is left over from oxidization and stuff, or so changing of the colors of the wall. So here you have it in all its glory. But we'll get back to the second thing that I can see, which I don't think she will mention it.
Oh my goodness, these people are so dark. They're so dark. And if these, tombs, these pictures in the tombs are over 4,000 years old.
Over 4,000 years old. So round about 2000 BC.
And they're still this dark. What does that tell you about what the ancient Egyptians were? Now, logically, we can think, hey, if some type of painting or type of artwork is over 4,000 years old, then of course there would be some wear and tear. Of course, the color would fade off a little bit, would rub off a little bit, right? Right.
So basically, she's saying that even this color here is a brightened version. And of course, you can see that some of the paint has fallen off. You can see in some of the images over here. If you look at the third guy who is holding that thing, which is a clue of what I'm going to talk about, his sort of chest area is sort of reddish and stuff. So some of the paint is losing its color. And it's starting to get a little bit like that reddish color. Also, keep in mind, look at the pots and baskets they're holding, which are supposed to be brown. Notice how they're lighter than the skin of the people.
Right. The people in these pictures are darker than me, and I'm black. Straight up, I'm black.
Yeah, she's black on 5 continents. So yeah, she's definitely a good representation of what black is. And here, these people are way darker than what I would expect someone to paint her.
These people are darker than me. and they have round afros.
So you all will remember that the excuse they give this is the Nubian wig, because of course it doesn't make any sense for people who have Middle Eastern DNA when they keep their hair like here. It doesn't make sense for these people to not have straight hair. Like, why wouldn't they portray themselves with straight hair? That's the default in, or even if it's curly, it has to be like wavy curly. But you don't see that. Instead, you see this sort of hair that looks like, basically looks like the same haircuts you would get in Africa if you had some hair.
Now, I mean, like, it's sad that I have to keep making these videos because people keep saying, what you're saying is wrong. The ancient Egyptians, the indigenous Egyptians, the native Egyptians weren't black. But look at how the ancient indigenous Egyptians are depicting themselves.
So I'm sure she thought that she was going to do a one and done of this video where she just says the ancient Egyptians were black. I'm kind of interested in this topic. Look at this, and it's over. But what really happened is some of those videos have some of the most views on her channel because, of course, that's a sort of controversial topic. And some of the people who watch her makeup stuff are not necessarily, black, or they're black, but they don't like the what they term Afrocentric part of YouTube. And so they try to, I guess, with love, try to reason her out of her position. But of course, when you look at, some of these things, you can see that she is absolutely correct.
And given that these pictures in these tombs are over 4,000 years old, and the color is still there, even though it has, I mean, the paint and the color of the paint has had to wear off at least a little bit, because nothing stays pristine and perfect after 4,000 years.
I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but one of the things that I liked about this channel is that it's not one of those channels where it invests all its time in history. It's not one of those channels that was doing any of that. This is just stuff that's obvious, even if you don't do deep dives into ancient Egypt. And so if you can't even go through this, if you can't explain away why they're portraying themselves so dark, then you're not even in the conversation.
That tells you that when they were painted, when the pictures were painted, the color was probably even more dark, was darker. You know what? It's so sad that someone has to come on here and make videos to support the well-known fact. Well, so, unfortunately, it's not well-known. Just the fact that.
So it is well known, but unfortunately, it's infamous, the idea that they're black. I mean, it's both ways. One, it's infamous. On the other side, people just look at it like, we all know the answer, but let's all pretend we don't know the answer.
The indigenous and native people of an African country are black. The native and indigenous people of Egypt, the African country, were definitely black.
So some people act like that is a simple argument, like arguing that people who lived in the African continent are probably black. They act like, oh, that's too simple and it doesn't reflect the true history. And this is true for later dates, but in the early times, 100%, it makes sense.
And they depict themselves as black. If these people are darker than me, and these pictures are 4,000 years old, and they have afros, and Egypt is in Africa, how could they be anything else but black?
So let me point out what I was going to point out. So if you notice the hair, including the chin hair, very similar to African, but notice the guy who's holding the sort of a vase, gourd type of thing, with the bottom that's red and the top that's black. This person is representing a type of pottery that is associated with Sudanese Nubian type pottery.
You should check out the article. It's going to be in the description. And yeah, I mean, it's just like self-explanatory, and it's so sad that there's so many people on this channel coming on talking about, uh, it's not true. It's not true. It is. It is. They were definitely black, and they painted themselves as black over 4,000 years ago.
So there you have it. That's the first video. The second video we're going to watch of her is her basically making the video because people keep reacting to her channel talking about how she is so wrong about ancient Egypt. And remember, I've said this before, the word Afrocentric in the mainstream, this is a makeup channel. Like half of the people who are responding to this, they don't really concern themselves too deeply about ancient Egypt and stuff like that. And so they still have this opinion of like, come on, guys, come on.
All right, so I wanted to get on here and address some of the comments I've been getting on my last video. The video is entitled, let's see, Real Egyptians are black, the original Egyptians are black. And I've been getting some really interesting comments. I will share them with you.
So no topic on the planet makes people angrier or more active on the internet than claiming anybody was black, even claiming Africans were black. You know, like I said, I used to watch videos about Rhodesia and how actually it's Zimbabwe and blah, 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 blah. And we kicked out the colonizers. And still to this day, there's a whole bunch of comments of Europeans trying to take claim of the African continent.
The last comment I got was from a person named Lord. He said, LOL, Egyptians were Caucasian. Not only have they done lots of DNA testing, but just look at their prominent noses. Egypt is also located right next to the Middle East and Europe. Why wouldn't it be Caucasian?
So one thing that you will notice, and this happens all the time, whenever you talk about the ancient Egyptians, suddenly Middle Easterners are not Arabs. They're not Middle Easterners. They're not even, you know, some other name they use for Middle Eastern people. Suddenly they become Caucasian. And of course, now that they're Caucasian, they have to add an extra level of confusion, which is, okay, so they're Caucasian, therefore Middle East people are Caucasian, therefore the Caucasians are the ones that were in ancient Egypt. And then you say, okay, so fine then. If Caucasians are the ones that dominated ancient Egypt and Middle Eastern people are Caucasians, then white people who are called Caucasians are people in the Middle East too. And so they too have claim over Europe. Then they're like, oh, no, 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 no. There's something else. You say, but you guys say the North Africans made their way into Europe early, not the black people, right? So it must be that they are the ones who were there, so they have claim over the lands, right? And they're like, no, 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 no. We're very two different things. But in this one, they're Caucasian.
Okay, so let me address that. Egypt is located next to the Middle East in Europe. It is not in the Middle East or Europe. Mainland Egypt is completely 100% in Africa.
So if you look at the map of Africa, which I don't know why this argument goes this far in this section, but if you look at the map of Africa, most of Egypt is located within the African continent, because there's a slight bit of it that is in Asia, and I'm talking about a tiny little bit that's within Asia. All of a sudden, it's an Asian country. This is something that, if you remember, Kim and Queen tried to point out, that Egypt is located both in the Middle East and in Africa. Now, you would like to think, by the way, why would these people obsess over Africa being in the Middle East? And the answer is because they know they come from the Middle East. And so, because they know they come from there, they have to sort of connect Egypt to the Middle East.
And the original indigenous native people of Africa are black. They're not European, they're not Caucasian, they're not Asian.
Again, a true fact, because no matter what timeline you put it on, the people who are indigenous in the truest sense to Africa are black natives and the entire continent. We have skulls going back way before Asians, even the earliest Asians they assume. We have skulls that go back way before that are located in Africa. Of course, what they try to do is they're like, oh, look at Tucker Quarry and look at this other skull, and they're looking. Believe me, they're looking for isolated tribes in North Africa so that they can say, oh, yeah, by the way, your people were hidden or something away from the North Africans so that you guys can continue to be, and this is one of the most annoying words, sub Saharan African.
They are black. And every time I make a video, every time a video is made about Egyptians being black, there are hundreds of people commenting with hate, talking about, no, Egypt is white. The people of Egypt are white. Okay, if the people of Egypt are white, when you look at the hieroglyphics, why do they have afros? Why do they have braids? Oh, and mind you, the only people who wear braids, like multiple braids, and I'm not talking about just one or two braids, I'm talking about 10s, 20, 30 braids, 100 braids in their hair. The only group of people who do that are people of African descent.
So while it's true that Europeans and some Asians did like knot up their hair a little bit in their ancient history, it's nothing like what you see in ancient Egypt. Let's quickly go to Egypt. So if we go to Africa, the braid is really not a choice. It's one of the typical hairstyles that is seen in Africa, whereas in Europe, usually they have straight hair. Braids are there, but usually, well, that type of braid is there. There's something called a French braid and all these things which exist, but they're small, they're done for specific things, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas in Africa, this is a typical hairstyle, and you can see the thickness and all of that. This is obviously due to the texture of the hair, which they do sort of flatten out and stuff like that so that it can be easier to do this with. But let's go look at what ancient Egyptian ones actually look like. Are they the wispy, thin ones that you see in Europe? Surprise, they're not. They're thick, they're double braids, they're mixed braids, they're all kinds of braids that they do. In fact, you never see the type of braids that you see in Europe, in Egypt. Never. Oh, someone put these two images together already. Look how beautiful that is. And obvious. Like, this is the same look, which, by the way, this is one of the things that makes me realize that these people know in some ways what it is, because they go, oh yeah, they used Nubian hair. Nubian hairstyles got popular. It's like, really? So Nubian hairstyles got popular. Did their language get popular? Did any of the other stuff get popular? No, nothing else got popular. Okay, if that's what you say.
But I'm going on a tangent. It just makes no sense. Egypt is clearly in Africa. Why wouldn't the original people of an African country be African? It's kind of impossible for Europeans to be the native people of Africa. It's impossible for Asians to be the native people of Africa.
So it's not just kind of impossible, it's very impossible for them to become the natives. Asians are obviously native to Asia. Europeans are obviously native to Europe. And I mean, there's a bit of a thing there, like a dash there, because, some Europeans are really native to Asia, Indo Europeans to be exact.
The white people, the Asian people you see in Egypt are not from Egypt. They are from the countries that are next to Egypt. So they're from the Middle East. Like Lord said, the Middle East and Asia and Europe are next to Egypt. They're from the neighboring countries. They're not actually from the original land of Egypt. And then he said, so this is just part of the. Then he said, you think Egypt is black because it's located in Africa and you found some black kids? What a joke.
Yeah. You will notice, by the way, that the way they talk to people about it, it's always so they try to be like biting about it. They're not coming at it like, hey, let's debate about this. If you really believe what you're saying, then have you considered this information? It's like, oh, it's a joke. You're just going crazy. What are you talking about? By the way, I want to address this image because I remember one of the arguments the other guy made was, how come one of the Asiatics that's being held here is the same color as the Egyptian? And I didn't mention this last time. So ancient Egyptians, when they overlap people, they tend to give them different colors because obviously if you make them the same colors, it starts to become a problem. And that is one of the reasons why they make one of the Asiatics a different color. And you can see the Nubian in the back. You can see one of the Asiatics who's painted yellow. And then you can see one of them who sort of has the same color as the pharaoh, but this is not done because they have the same color. This is done in order to avoid overlapping colors, which, if you don't know, sometimes the ancient people do use darker colors than you would expect for some things. But for the most part, if they're white, they paint themselves as white. But some people take these exceptions and go, see, even the Greeks painted themselves sometimes as dark. And then you go, yeah, but look at the rest of the Greek paintings.
Okay. All right. I mean, we could just use logic. Just use logic.
Who the hell is that guy? What the hell is just some random guy standing there?
Hey y'all, Maya Hope here, and I'm back with another video. This video is to address the first video I did about the real Egyptians, the native indigenous Egyptians being black African. And I just wanted to go over some of the comments that were left on my video. The thumbnail for the video looks like this. And
by the way, for those who might search the video, the thumbnail has definitely changed. I don't think the video has been deleted, but I'm not sure which one that one is, since there are many of them with the same title.
And thanks to some lovely trolls, I have a lot of comments. All right, let's get into it. I'm gonna read some of these. So someone told me that me stating that since mainland Egypt is in Africa, that means the indigenous people of an African country is African, right? Like the indigenous people are African. Egypt is in mainland Africa. It is not in Asia. It is not in Europe. So why, how can you, since Egypt is not in Europe, it's not in Asia, the Middle East isn't a real area. It's a geopolitical area. It's
So before we go too deep, let me address a couple things about this. So first thing to address is Near East. Obviously, when I say Middle East, I mean every part of the Middle East except North Africa. I'm not trying to say Near East. It's Middle East. And another thing that I want to address is when she said the Europe thing. Remember, Europe is not in the conversation of this. The only respectable arguments even in the mainstream is the Middle East versus Black Africans. It's got nothing to do with Europe. But because they insert themselves so much into this conversation, people go, oh yeah, it's not in Europe, it's not in Europe. And all the while we're forgetting that we're debating with people who are not even in the running.
It's not a comment. How can we argue that an African country somehow has native indigenous people that are non-African? If anyone can answer that question, you will win the prize. You will win the prize.
What prize? What's the prize there? I might have some answers for you. they might not stand up in a court of law, but I guess, maybe what's the prize?
of the year. Like, I won't make any more of these videos. I won't argue with you. And you just can't do it. Like, I mean, how can you really sit here and say that the native people of an African country are somehow not African?
So the obvious way that they go about this is to say there was a mass migration due to the change and the greening of the Sahara. When the Sahara greened, then people who lived in the desert, that is the Middle East, followed the green into Africa, moving with a large population that went with the green all the way through North Africa. Now, the obvious question about this is, why North Africa? Why didn't they follow the green going through Ethiopia and the rest of Africa, really? Why one section of Africa? I mean, that's a very weird place to stop. The second one is, are we just gonna sit here and pretend that there was nobody there before they got there? Like somehow there was just nobody there. Now some people, I've heard them say that yes, there must have been nobody there because it got desertified. So it was a desert, so there was less humans over there. And then when they migrated in, those humans got overwhelmed by the new people. Now, as well thought out as that is, it's not satisfactory because once it gets wet again, why does it not bring other Africans from the south, since the Africans that ended up in the north came from the south? And they must have been aware that there was a desert, and they must have seen with their own eyes, like, oh, this desert is going away. Or did they decide that even when the Sahara was green, they were like, no, never go past this area. We don't want to mix with North Africans. And then, of course, there's the whole problem of DNA from sub-Saharan Africa, as they call it, found in North Africa 10,000 BC. That is a real big problem for them because it takes away this wishful idea that Southern Africans or Africans to the south of that, of North Africa, are limited.
All right. Someone said that's a huge leap of logic. Okay. Maybe I didn't explain it very well. But all of you, I'm sure most of you have heard of the out of Africa theory, anthropology.
Well, we've all definitely heard of it. And if I know which direction you're going to here, a lot of those same Middle Easterners that they're talking about would have been black at the time. But let's not get into that right now. But if we look at it at this conversation, the out of Africa theory is one, and I've played it on my channel, that they try to doubt. And the reason for that is obvious because of what you're saying right now. If Africans came from Africa, how do we remove them from Africa? How do we remove them from being the first? How do we remove them from being the most important race that ever existed? And the way you do that is you start to claim that humans came from completely different sections of the world. Otherwise, people in the Middle East as well would have looked very similar. I mean, remember that DNA we found of a Sumerian? He lacked the alleles of being a white person, even though he was a Sumerian from 2000 BC in Egypt. He would have been a very dark skinned person. Oh, by the way, that's a guess that he's from Sumeria or whatever. They're just basing that on a similar DNA thing. But I'll get back to that in another video.
Just have been studying the origins of humankind for a very long time, and even until today, it's not disputed that the first human beings came from East Africa.
Okay, one criticism: this music is way too loud. This is one of the reasons why I don't add music to videos. I mean, I could just like find YouTube music and just add it, but one of the problems with it is it just drowns what you're saying. And it's like, I think most people can sit down and listen to you without listening to like doo-doo-doo, 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 ding ding ding.
Africa, what is today Ethiopia and Kenya, just that general area. Both Ethiopia and Kenya are Nile Basin countries. So is Uganda, and so is Sudan, and so is Egypt. The Nile starts in Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is in Uganda. And then you have, going upward, you have Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, right? If the first people are coming from this area, and the Nile naturally flows from the southern countries up into the north and empties out in Egypt in the Mediterranean Sea, we know that the first people had to come from Africa. They didn't come from Asia. The first people to inhabit, to live in.
So what she's saying is absolutely true. And yes, the thing that a lot of them don't talk about is how if the greening of the Sahara brought these Middle Easterners to Egypt, why did the flowing of the Nile, which still does, why did that not bring Africans further north? Since, I mean, I've said it before, I've got a video called this, which is follow the water, because human beings, they follow the water. Just by following the water, just by traveling on the Nile and being like, oh, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be posted here, I'm going to post it here. Just by following the Nile, they would end up in Egypt. That's all. Like trying to find an end to the river, especially when they're like, this part's dangerous, let's move a little higher. This part's dangerous, let's move a little higher. This part's sort of drying out, let's move a little higher. They would eventually end up in Sudan and Egypt. And we know this happened because we find the same general populations. I mean, the Nilotic people, we call them Nilotic, but their DNA has been spotted all the way south of the Nilotic areas. As far south, by the way, as Mozambique. So again, we know that Africans moved up and down Africa. Surprise.
Egypt were Africans because the first people were Africans. They were black Africans. Black Africans originated from East Africa, in those countries I just named, in those Nile Basin countries that I just named. And then they wound up.
Well, according to them, they end up in every country in Africa except the ones that they're closest to. They start off very close to Egypt, but somehow they end up every single place in Africa except Ethiopia, except close to Ethiopia.
Traveling to more northern countries using the Nile. Still, can you please explain to me?
Did you catch that? Even as she's saying it, she's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe such obvious information is not in their head." Like that's definitely the face of someone who's like, "Oh my God, this is so obvious." It's actually annoying her how obvious it is.
You know, after knowing this information, can you please explain to me how, magically, the native people of Egypt are not black? The indigenous, the very first people are not black.
They can't do it. All their theories, even the ones that say back and blah, 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 they can't do it because all their theories still say that they came from elsewhere.
The first human beings are coming from East Africa and from these Nile Basin countries. And Lake Victoria begins, it starts the Nile, it's the beginning of the Nile. The Nile starts in Lake Victoria in East Africa and it empties out in Egypt. And the first people come from this East African region. And then people are moving from this East African region up. How are the first people not African?
That's a question that we've all been asking for 100 times. Now, if you remember, I showed a debate here that had JF, someone who was a racist guy, and it had another white woman, and they were debating. And even he had to admit that this is a neutralizing argument. You cannot say anything about the Middle East or the Near East, if you like. You cannot say anything about them if you're not going to acknowledge the waters, the Nile, moving the people upwards. He even said there Saturday and said, I admit that that does neutralize the argument.
Black African. How are they Caucasian? Or you keep saying Caucasians, Caucasoids. People keep saying that in my comments. People keep saying that they were Asian. People keep saying that they're Middle Eastern. Middle East isn't a real thing. It's a geopolitical area carved out, mapped up.
So you will notice there's two words here that she gets a lot, which is Caucasian and Caucasoid. Now you might be thinking, why are they using these words, Caucasian and Caucasoid? Well, a lot of times some people like to separate Caucasian, meaning a white person, from Caucasoid because, again, these people do not consider themselves similar to Middle Eastern people. In fact, they consider themselves very different. But as I've pointed out before, if you start from Syria and go all the way to Greece or Italy, those people look so similar that an unbiased person would put all of those people in the same block. But because they've got bias, they go, no, these are Europeans, which now geographically locks them in. And then Middle Eastern people, which they're going to call Asian, this is another problem because the word Asian is talking about too many people. This is why some of the other more controversial words I forgot, but we're not allowed to say it, that talks about Asians. Those ones don't work either because Asia has got Indians, it's got Chinese people, it's got Polynesian people, it's got Russians, it's got all kinds of people. So what does an Asian look like? So this is why I just stick with Middle Eastern, because we all know what a Middle Eastern person looks like. And I do include the North Africans, but when I say Middle Eastern, I'm talking about in the ancient world, Middle East would have been stuck in the Near East, and in the modern world, Middle East includes North Africa because there's so many of them there now.
I mean, honestly, this is beyond me. I'm gonna read a comment that kind of explains what I'm trying to get across. Because I mean, a lot of people, I know this is gonna be contested, and it should be. We should have this discussion. But Uptalk says here that they already know this but refuse the truth. The Caucasoid race didn't migrate into Egypt until around the late Third Intermediate period. Prior to that, the ancient Egyptians were completely black for thousands of years, going back to the Old Kingdom. Nubia and ancient Egypt were the same people, just different kingdoms. Egypt's decline as a superpower was due to its intermingling with other races. They brought in people who were not aware of their culture and customs and mysticisms. The Greeks, the Romans, and the Arabs destroyed Egypt. Now, okay, here's another thing.
So before they get into the details of this, let me talk about the part that they've already addressed, which is them trying to separate the Nubians from the Egyptians and trying to separate the other people who are there in Egypt from the Egyptians of the Nile. And as the ancient Egyptians have mentioned themselves, these people were all Egyptian. We're calling them Nubians because we're separating them, quote unquote, by race. And the reason why we're doing this is because they come from the south, and the Egyptians say these guys come from the south, and then they end up somewhere in Egypt. They work in, and by the way, I remember showing you a biased map where it took all the people who work in Egypt, where in Egyptian records, they're in Egypt, and then it put them somewhere in Sudan, which is like, why did you do that? And then the map goes and puts the land of Punt in Sudan again, instead where it should be somewhere in Ethiopia, which has been kind of proven by monkey DNA and stuff like that.
No, I am not sitting here saying that there aren't non-black people in Egypt. there's obviously non-black people in Egypt, but they are colonizers. Arabs colonized Egypt in the 1600s. But before that, the Greeks colonized Egypt out like 3,000 years ago. Okay, I've lived in Alexandria. I've lived in Cairo. I've lived in Sinai. I see what the people look like. The people in southern Egypt, which is Upper Egypt, are black. They're just straight up black. They have dreads. They're dark skinned. I showed a video.
Okay, again, we're going to have to address both of the things that she's saying right now. She's saying, of course, that the people have been colonized, and this is true, and it doesn't just start with the Greeks, it goes back. And when this colonization happens, we see a change in the people, in the population. And so this is how we get to this answer, which, by the way, they hate that word colonizer. I don't know why, because that's what happened, right, in the past. Like, do they not believe that Arabs colonized Africa?
Of these people, a clip of these people in my last video. It's just, I mean, yes, there are non-black people living in Egypt, but they're not native. They're not indigenous. They're not the first people. Because the first people to ever exist were not non-black. They were black.
So according to her, she actually did go to Egypt to study Arabic and lived there for a while and saw the people firsthand, which, by the way, is one of the arguments they like to throw on people. It's like, you guys have never even been to Egypt and you guys are saying this, but there's a lot of people who've been to Egypt, white and black people, as we will see in another video that she provides, including Egyptians, who even they say, yeah, I can see that the black Africans are the natives. Everything here just indicates that. Looking at the statues, looking at everything just indicates this. And then, of course, they find like 3 statues that kind of look like Middle Eastern people, and they put them all the way in the front. It's all a trick.
So, yeah, this is just very interesting. So just please tell me, considering the out of Africa theory and considering the fact that the first human beings came from East Africa and moved from Lake Victoria up into Egypt, how could the first Egyptians not be black? Please, just answer that question.
So this will be the final video of hers that we watched today, and it's of her interacting with the modern Egyptians because she lived again in Egypt. So let's see this part of it.
Hey, Maya here, and I would like to present to you a story time about my time that I lived abroad in Egypt. So I lived in Egypt for 2.5 years, from 2015 to 2018.
So basically, this is not the tourist experience that she's getting. She's getting a full understanding, at least a somewhat understanding. Obviously, if you go and live for 3 years somewhere, I don't mean you understand everything about the country, but you're getting a much more in-depth understanding of the people, day-to-day understanding of the people, rather than the type of life that a lot of people, they go and have large opinions, spending 1 or 2 days in Egypt, or a week, or a month.
And I wanted to talk about some of the experiences that I had that pointed to the fact that, and reaffirmed the fact that, native indigenous Egyptians are black.
So again, to say it again, a lot of people say you must go to the country, and once you get there and we show you the pyramids and we show you everything, it'll confirm to you that they're not black. But she went, she lived, she saw, and she came back with a stronger position of it.
Native indigenous, I'm not talking about the ones that you see today that are of Turkish descent and of Arab descent and of European descent, because Egypt has been colonized for thousands of years by Arabs, Turks, and Europeans,
who in their colonization brought extended family members, wives from the Middle East. Like, some of them would marry a first wife that is from the Middle East and bring them down, and then they would get like concubines, which could be from African descent, which could be from whatever.
And quite frankly, the history has been completely whitewashed, to the fact that somehow magically in the African country is now non-African or non-Black African. So, okay, so let's get into it. I remember I was caught off guard several times while in the street. So in Egypt, there's a lot of sexual harassment, and women definitely have no type of societal equality.
So before we carry on, I want to remind you that she spent a long time in Egypt. So I'm going to defer to what she says. I'm not saying everything she's saying is true. Obviously, I don't believe that every single day, every single woman experiences sexual harassment every single minute. But I do believe that there's some truth to what she is saying. And countries that are like this, that have this heavy anti fornication laws and stuff like that, they tend to have stuff like that going on. I mean, this is true for the Middle East in general. This is true for other countries that are very conservative in that way. And some people say, well, isn't that the right thing to do? And the answer is no, because it just goes too much against human nature and starts making men and women behave completely out of their nature.
And can be treated pretty bad. So when I was in the street several times, I would get things yelled at me, racial slurs.
Oh, well, that's a surprise. Are you saying that Egypt has a racism problem that might be biasing the way that they do some of the studies in ancient Egypt? That would be that would be very shocking. Also, of course, she's talking about something that you will experience if you go to other people. There's actually a video that I want to react to that a lot of people I've seen who are Black react to, and some of them even started crying, which is IShowSpeed being in Africa and then not having these racist stuff thrown at him because obviously he's in a Black country, and they're sitting there, people are sitting there looking at South Africa and all these other African countries going, wow, they're actually beautiful, which is something that I tried to portray in one of my other videos. But the guy who I was talking about was going on about statistics of poverty and stuff like that. But it's hard to explain how beautiful Africa is and how similar it is to first world countries without showing it to people. So you just give up and go, okay, well, I guess you got your statistics.
And but in contrast, I've had some interesting things said to me while on the street as well. So one of those really interesting things was that a couple of times I had men drive past me and they would say Ya Asliya, and Asliya in Arabic means original. And I was like, why are they calling me that? Like, what? I mean, I'm not from Egypt. Trust me, I don't want to be Egyptian. I'm not from Egypt. I am proud to be a Black American.
That's right. That's another thing that's thrown at us just because we believe the ancient Egyptians were Black. It's like you just want to live in Egypt now and you want to take over and you want to be Egyptian, and you can't be Egyptian. All you can do is dress up like Egyptian and play Egyptian and da 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 da. And it's like, bruh, half the people that you're talking about are proud to be wherever they're from. If they're from Senegal, they're proud to be from Senegal. If they're from Congo, they're proud to be from Congo. If they're from America, they're proud to be from America. If they're from whatever the hell, they have no problem with their wherever they come from. But, this is one of those things they try to use so that you can feel embarrassed and go, I give up the argument because it looks embarrassing to try and be something else.
All right. Creators of hip hop, a world phenomenon. All right. So I don't want to be Egyptian, but I thought it was interesting that just a rando driving past called me Asliya, which means original. So time goes on, a couple of weeks go by, and someone else calls me, and this is within my first couple of months in Egypt. And so Oh, and another thing that people would say would they'd be like, Yasamra, which means like, hey, dark skinned girl, right? And
So I apologize for interrupting the story time because I'm enjoying it too, but YouTube will punish me if I do not talk within the video. I will start to get copyright. So we basically can tell where the story is going, but I don't want to spoil it or anything like that. I want her to get to her conclusion of what really happened.
somebody says Yasamra, and I'm like, I say hey balek, which means like shame on you, like have some manners. And he's like, no, 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 I'm calling you that. It's, your skin is beautiful, you're dark or whatever. And inti asliya, come on. So he's like, yeah, you're original too. But I'm like, no, I'm not from Egypt. He's like, oh, well, you look like the Nubians, you look like the original Egyptians.
So I'm glad someone who actually was in Egypt is saying this, because I've talked to Egyptians who are here in South Africa, and a lot of them will just state out flat, just be like, yeah, we know that the originals are like the black Africans. Like we can tell from the statues, we can tell from all of that they're the originals. And then they speak like, okay, yeah, of course there's racism over there. When we come down to the south, it's almost like looking at the statues of Egypt, we can easily tell. So Egyptians themselves, the Egyptians of today, so not the Kemites, Egyptians can tell that the people in Africa, the rest of Africa, look like the statues, which is why, by the way, and this is such a good point, if I do say so myself, which is why they always use the same 7 statues to try and prove that they're Egyptian. They go, isn't this fantastic? This Egyptian one has a beard. This one is yellow. And it's like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But what about all the others that look nothing like that? And they're like, no, but if you look at this one, it's like, listen, people, can't you see what you're doing? You're obviously ignoring the others because you realize they don't match what you're trying to portray here. And they go, wait a minute, wait a minute. If there is one that looks like a Middle Easterner, then they must be Middle Eastern. It's like, no, that's not how it works, my friend. That's not. If we found one skeleton in South Africa 6,000 years ago that was blonde, it doesn't mean everyone in South Africa was a blonde person. Could be a stowaway, could be whatever. But they operate on the we found one, therefore it's true. And it's the same. You could do the opposite. If we find one person from in Canada who's from South Africa, his DNA is one, it doesn't mean all Canadians suddenly become black South Africans.
Now, I find that very interesting. So 2 random men on the street tell me that I look like the original Egyptians, which they claim are Nubians. Okay, at this time, I had never gone to Upper Egypt, which is where most Nubians live, where Nubian civilization was and started and still persists. Now, ancient Nubia dates back to 7,000 years ago.
So if you guys have never seen it, there's actually a documentary by Zainab Badawi that has the same thing, where she goes around basically asking the question of, were the ancient Egyptians black Africans? Now, generally, she does a thing about ancient Egypt, but there's a whole over umbrella thing about, were they black Africans? And of course, because she's black, a lot of people are going to think it's bias or whatever, but she's a real journalist type person, and this isn't bias, this is genuine curiosity. And she talks to the so-called Nubians in the south, who also claim that they are the natives or the first people to be there. And then of course she talks to another person who is a, let's say, one of these people who moves people along. I hate English. One of those people, what do you call those people who walk around showing people stuff, whatever they are? And those people basically say, yeah, you're right about that. And then of course you go, she has another one where she goes into North African history, and again there's this whole debate about whether North Africans are proper North Africans. You can watch this on YouTube, by the way. I actually recommend watching this one, Gift of the Nile by Zainab Badawi.
Nubians inhabited Egypt over 7,000 years ago. They built all those famous temples that you see, not the pyramids in Giza, that's in Lower Egypt, which is closer to the Mediterranean Sea, which is in Cairo, Giza. But they built all the temples you see in Luxor, and Aswan, Assaid too. And at this point, I hadn't spent time with Nubians. I didn't know too much because, I'd been in Egypt for a couple of months at this time.
So this is why I say she's a bit of a interesting case, because she isn't that, because everybody who studies a little bit of Egypt, immediately Nubians come up. And so it is interesting that she didn't really know about the so-called Nubians that live in this area.
So fast forward a year, and I have this new roommate, and she's Egyptian, but she's Egyptian of Turkish descent, and her mom visits our apartment all the time. And her mom is, she's a proud Turkish Egyptian woman. And out of nowhere, one day when she was serving us dinner at our apartment, she's like, "Ah, Maya, sheklik asliya." And what that means is like, you look like the original people.
Again, this is very interesting that they seem to point this out to her. It seems like they're very loose about race in Egypt. They just randomly go and say, "Oh, original people, blah blah." Usually, it would take a while before we get into that debate with somebody. I'd have to know them pretty well to be that open about it. It's crazy. But from what she's saying, she said, because the music came in, and I don't want you guys to like rewind 100 times. She said, you look like the original people.
It's like, yeah, your face, like, it's like the statues that we see. And at this point, I'm like, okay, whatever, that's what you think, that's what you say. But still, I mean, what these experiences are telling me is that there are groups of people in Egypt, and these people were non-black Egyptians. They weren't Nubian, they weren't the black Egyptians, they were Arab. They were Egyptians of Arab and Turkish descent.
By the way, this is one of the points that I wanted to point out in one of my videos, and I did in the very early videos, that some people from Egypt, not only do they have not siblings, they have ancestors in Arabia, they know who their ancestors are. So if they were doing a thing of like finding my roots or tracing my roots, they would pull up what part of Arabia they think they come from and the family they're connected to, which again, you might think, oh, 600 years, that's a long time to be disconnected to a place. But it's like, it's only a long time if your two families are completely separate. I mean, a lot of American history sort of gives this impression that everyone around the world, they're just so separated from people. But, if you take Africa, for example, there are people who have tribes who have moved like 600 years ago, but the two tribes still remember that they're tribes that came from one another, in the same way that Herodotus says that the Colchians still remember the Egyptians, even though it's hundreds of years later.
Okay. And so I thought to myself, okay, so there are people who are woke in Egypt and know that the indigenous native people, meaning the first peoples of this African country, were black.
Of course they are. And not only are they the people of Egypt, there are also people before that and I'd like to point out the example that she gave, that the woman said, "You look like the statues." I've said this before and I've said it again. I've seen a BBC documentary, I can't play it obviously, where one of the hosts literally is looking at the statues and you see a slight grin on his face but he says nothing the whole time. And then they send a Egyptologist to him called Muhammad Ali, and this Egyptologist talks about the Nubians and says, if you look at some of their face, they kind of look like black people. And then he's like, the other guy is like, right, these people kind of look like black people. And he didn't even mean the Nubians. He basically meant the Egyptians. They kind of look like black people if you look at them. But you don't want to say that because you're gonna be like, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And you see this a lot. A lot of people, when you show them the statues, when you go, whatever. And I've done this before where on another stream that had nothing to do with this channel, where I showed people a statue and immediately they went, oh, Nubians. It was a pharaoh of Egypt. So in their head, they placed that statue as a black person. So for reference, this is the statue that I used. I was like, okay, so here's a statue. What do you think? And they were like, oh, Nubians. Yeah, of course, Nubians had something to do with ancient Egypt at one time, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, this is Amenhotep III. He's an Egyptian. And they're like, oh, now that you pointed out, I can see that he's sort of Caucasian. I'm like, bruh, get out of here. You saw a black man the first time you saw this, and now you're trying to fix it. You're trying to fix what your eyes can see. And by the way, I dare anybody to tell me that they don't see a black man when they see this.
Because now remember, the black race was the first race. The out of Africa theory teaches us that. Anthropologists have looked and looked and looked and looked, but still have yet to find older bones, older Homo sapien bones that are outside of Africa.
So I understand that some of you probably are thinking right now, why is it important to keep pointing out the out of Africa theory? It's because it's one of the greatest evidences against them. And I said it again, they like to pretend that it's been debunked or it's fake or it's going to change in the future. But the out of Africa theory is not just a bone thing, it's a DNA thing. It's all the types of things. There's a lot of things that point to it. But, they want to go against it because it has the problem of Europeans starting out as black people.
East Africa, that is. And Egypt is in East Africa. But so those are those experiences. And then like towards the end of my stay, I started to spend time in Upper Egypt, which is where you find all the black Egyptians pretty much. And these people don't come from Asia. They don't come from the Arabian Peninsula. They don't come from Turkey. They don't come from Europe like all the other Egyptians do. They come from the continent of Africa, where Egypt is. Egypt is in the continent of Africa.
So another part that she fails to mention, which is in this image, is that what the Nubians have, you can see inside of the ancient Egyptian stuff. So the Nubians and the Egyptians in the past are basically the same thing. It's only later that people, and this is why I hate the term multicultural in ancient Egypt, because they try their best to be like, no, these were two completely different civilizations. Like, no, they weren't. It's like, no, the other one colonized the other. No, it's called the two lands. Egypt was the two lands. This is not colonization in the way that you think. And this is why, by the way, when the lower part, Upper Egypt, wants to separate, they're called rebellious, or words that are similar to that, meaning like a family member that's badly behaved, rather than what they call the foreigners, like Libyans and Asiatics and people like that.
Right? And I mean, these people don't speak Arabic because they're not Arab. And Arabs don't come from Egypt. These people speak Nubian.
So let's quickly point out a couple things. Yes, there is Nubian as a language. There's even Old Nubian as a language. But these people here in this area, they go back and forth historically with the languages they speak. As you can tell, the Beja as well spoke another Afro-Asiatic language. that is not necessarily Nilotic like Nubian, even though Nubian isn't strictly as Nilotic as some people would think. But people are going to be quick to point out Coptic as like, oh, there's also Coptic, which again, Coptic is a religious language, which is mixed with Greek. And because it's a religious language, the way you talk it will not be very similar to how a normal person talks the ancient Egyptian language. Not to mention that Coptic was understood not only by those people, but it was also understood by people from the south, like Zulnun al Misri, a Nubian Coptic who existed back in the day. I call him Nubian, that's the word they use for these people, but he was just an Egyptian who was black skin, as described by other Arabs, who spoke Coptic and, in fact, translated the ancient Egyptian language because people say the ancient Egyptian language was lost. But what really happened is the native speakers sort of got overwhelmed by a population of people who speak a completely different language. Now, some people are going to say, well, with the spread of Arabic, don't languages disappear? And that is true, but Tamazight is still a spoken language. Assyrian is still a spoken language. A lot of languages in the Middle East, even though Arabic came there, are still spoken languages. Why does it die specifically in Egypt? Why does it die there? Also, another one, this is my favorite slam dunk on this one. Another place, the Swahili coast, that was overran by Arabic. People had to write in Arabic, they had to learn Arabic, all of that stuff. But guess which language they spoke? Swahili, the Zanji language, as Al Masudi describes it. These people, they travel all the way to Madagascar and back, and they speak the Zanji language, even though they are Muslims, recently turned Muslims. This idea that Muslims, they come there, they give you Arabic, and they tell you you're not allowed to speak your native language. When did that happen? The ancient Greeks. When did they tell the people, the natives, they're not allowed to speak their language? If if that didn't happen, how did they lose their native language? How did they get disconnected with their original culture when every other person who has been conquered by Arabs has maintained it?
They speak Nubian, an ancient 7,000-year-old language that originated in Egypt and Sudan. Oh, and let me just say, Egypt and Sudan were the same country up until the 1800s. And no one would ever try to argue and say that Sudanese people aren't black. They some of the blackest people on this planet, okay?
Boy, do I wish that was real. But there are several people on the internet who try to argue that the Nubians and the Sudanese and the Kermers and all of these people, they try to argue that they were Asiatics. Boy, do I wish they didn't try to argue away black people in history, showing their bias, by the way.
And I'm just saying, like, Sudan and Egypt were the same country for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, all right. Well, forget that. And I just want to say that that's my story time. I've had multiple people tell me I personally don't think I look Egyptian, but you know, even Nubians have told me that I look like them, and they're definitely Egyptian. They're like the first tribe, one of the very first original tribes of Egypt, ethnic groups in Egypt. And
By the way, I would like to point out that there is written evidence that shows that people as far as Sudan also spoke the ancient Egyptian language, and they also used it to communicate, even in the later years, as late as 400 AD, well, maybe 300 AD, in Egypt. They used to go praise there, and they probably still understood a lot of the language. But of course, they had their own language because they're a completely different kingdom. The Kermans and stuff like that, they're their own language, and that was what they were mainly focused on. Which is why it's not a surprise that it took someone who like Zulnun al Misri to try and translate it. Which I've watched a couple people talk about Zulnun al Misri because a lot of these books are in Arabic and they haven't been translated, and the people who translate them say, some people say that he just could read the entire language, which is like, okay.
And they still speak a 7,000-year-old Pharaonic language. No other group of people in Egypt still speak a Pharaonic language. Like, no other group. Not the Arabs, because they don't come from Egypt. Not the Turkish, because they don't come from Egypt. Not the Europeans, because they don't come from Egypt. Everybody speaks a broken pidgin Arabic language. Ancient Egyptians did not speak Arabic. Oh, but we have this group of people that don't speak Arabic as a first language, but speak an ancient 7,000-year-old Pharaonic language.
So there's obviously more videos from her, but we can stop here.
Hey everyone, so here I already see I have a troll here. Hi, Evo Devo 85. How are you?
Okay, so a bonus clip, because this one is from a video of her in a live stream talking, and it's a little different. The only reason I cut it there, I said I was going to cut it there, was because all the others are basically a repeat of what she says, whereas this one has a little bit of a different twist to it.
Welcome to all the trolls. So the native indigenous Egyptians, well, you know what? Let me have them speak on the topic for themselves.
There you go. Again, you can see this in Zainab Badawi's documentary, but these Nubians, so-called, as they say, they also claim to be the first Egyptians and then other Egyptians, and she's about to show some of them who say this, because actually I remember King's Monologue talked to another guy from Egypt, and he also made this claim as well, which is interesting.
Egyptians are black. The real Egyptians are black, because the real Egyptians, they are real Africans. So those people in Lower Egypt, you see in Cairo, Alexandria, and Falahins area, they were mixed between the Turkish, Mamluks, French, English, Romans.
Now, of course, that's a heavy set of colonizer DNA, but you would think they would actually be proud of that. Like, why aren't they sitting there saying, look what we have achieved as these people? But instead, they try to attach themselves to a completely different situation.
So those people who come to attack Egypt in that time, they couldn't come to Upper Egypt, to the south, which we still have the same color.
Bro, this old man is telling the truth as it is, bro. And that's exactly what I talk about, which is, of course, you're going to find a lot of Middle Eastern in the corners of Egypt, especially if you go to very selected places, which again, I will point out, the DNA found in those places had Black African DNA. And when they say we found new ones that don't have it, they actually have the E, but because they've reclassified that E as like typical in North Africa, they then say it doesn't have any African because that E, go ask them. Go ask them. Go. These people, they will talk to you if you go ask them. Go ask them in their universities. Go email them and ask them if they have this E and if this E is associated with Africa. Go ask them. But then they'll go like, oh, there's not even a shred of African DNA. It's like, it's got the E. That's from Africa.
Our dark color or black color. So they couldn't mix with us.
Next question. Okay, what question?
So they had limited mixture with them. Not that they couldn't mix at all, but what he's saying is absolutely true, because the question is, why are they still a lot of Black people in the southern parts of Egypt, especially given the fact that these guys say slaves came from Africa, right? Which they did. Why didn't they take the slaves from Nubia? If they had this bias of taking Black slaves, why didn't they take the Black ones like the Beja and people like that? Why were the Beja doing the enslaving? rather than them being the slaves. Why do Arabs write the Beja as a free people up until today? This is so stupid. Think about it. Think about if you thought that those people were just some slave race, why aren't they taken? Why are they allowed to just roam there and then they go further south to go fetch black Africans? Make it make sense.
هم الصم انما البيض اللي كلهم you see I explained to him about the Nubians and the Egyptians. They were not white, they are black Africans. So he say now ليه هنا الناس لسه صم صعيد بحري بيض.
So before he translates this, you heard what he said. He said the Sudanese, the Nubians, the Egyptians, they are not white. They're all black, which repeats something that I saw somewhere else where they actually asked Sudanese people, do they think that they're related to ancient Egyptians? And they said yes. And they said the only difference between us in the south and the ones further north is that they're slightly lighter than us.
He said the people in Lower East, most of them, they are not Egyptians. They are Greeks from south.
All right, so all right, so if you all need any more proof or reason to believe the truth, and the truth is that native indigenous Egyptians were indeed black Africans. It is Africa at the end of the day. Egypt and Sudan were the same country for thousands of years, and Sudan has the blackest people on earth.
Is there really much more that needs to be said?
I mean, we can just all use common sense and figure out what the truth is. But you know what? A lot of people are like, oh, what do you know? I'm just a black American, right? Oh yeah, like never mind the fact that, you know, I'm a PhD at an Ivy League school, have published work, you know, forget that, right? It's just I'm American, so I can't speak on the topic. So this is why
I loved her videos. All the criticisms that they like to give to people of uneducated, stuck in America, never been to Egypt, blah, 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 blah. All of them, she just crushes them. Oh, yeah, you didn't get that information from the native Egyptians. You didn't get it from the local Egyptians, blah, 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 blah. And there you go. Oh, no, the people, they would never say this. They would, all of it just shattered by one person.
I brought up the video for you guys to look at, which shows native Egyptians talking about the race of Egyptians. And if, you know, I'll play it one more time for everyone to see, because this isn't me talking. This isn't an American talking. These are Egyptians. These are people who currently live in Egypt, and these are people who are native and indigenous to Egypt speaking out about the truth, about who the people are in Cairo and Alexandria. They are not native Egyptians. These people are descendants of Europeans.
By the way, this is why it's so important to have a diversity of voices, even people who come from Africa who are not from Egypt, so that this argument they make about, oh, it's because they were enslaved and now they're looking for a homeland. It's like, well, my people were not enslaved. And I'm not looking for a homeland. I know exactly where I come from and all this other stuff. And I still believe that they were black. So what's your excuse at this point? And of course, their answer is going to be, oh, you just want the gold of Egypt. It's like, bruh, you guys need to calm down with everything you say.
Of Turks, of Asians, of people from the Middle East. These people are not descendants of, they do not originate from the people of Africa. Like, they don't. And people always love to tell me, oh, well, they've done DNA tests, and DNA tests show that the ancient Egyptians have more ties with the Levant than Africa. Well, guess why? Guess what? Guess why? Guess why that's the case? Because those people that they sampled the DNA from were not indigenous native Africans. These people.
So it's time to play a game called I found Middle Eastern DNA in Egypt, therefore it's native to Egypt, except when I don't want it to be. So you guys do remember there was that Sumerian guy from 2000 BC who they say they found in ancient Egypt. But they said it seems like he was not a local person. It seems like he came from Sumeria. But when we test his DNA, it seems very close to other Egyptians, but for a specific part of it, of the DNA, that seems Sumerian. Now, the question is, how can they conclude that this guy is not just another native Egyptian, just with a different type of DNA? That's because it corresponds with other Middle Easterners. Remember when they say these other people are closer to the people of the Levant? If someone from 2000 BC can still be traced to Asia, why can't people from 500 BC, 200 BC? Why is it that when you find these people in Egypt, you have to conclude that they're native to the country? That 8% black DNA to me comes across as these are foreigners who mated with black native Egyptians, and then now they're sort of taking the place of these people. Because, of course, the question would be, why in the north? Why so far in the north are there black people's DNA inside of these random people? By the way, this is way before the slave trade started, especially the race-based slave trade.
Came from the Middle East. They were migrants, they were colonizers, and they were invaders of Africa. And Egypt is in mainland Africa, right? Well, mainland Egypt is in Africa. There's a little teeny part in a contested piece of land, but none of the ruins are there.
So she plays the video again, and we've already seen it, so we're gonna skip to the end.
Time I'm going to play this video again. You don't have to believe me. Don't listen to me, right? If it's not good enough, if I'm not good enough to talk about this topic because I'm an American and I'm a Black American, I'm trying to steal ancient Egyptian history. No, I'm not. I'm African. I'm a person who is a part of the African diaspora. Native Egyptians, the people that built ancient Egypt. They are also a part of the African diaspora. We are all connected via the African diaspora. No one complains about white people who have no ties to Rome, ancient Rome and ancient Greece, how they claim that history all day long. Like, there are people from Germanic tribes who were enslaved by Southern Europeans who, by the way, got all of their knowledge from Africans, Egyptians.
This is why I wanted to repeat this video again, because it seems like almost every other part, because I've watched some videos of people saying, you can't have Africans play roles of these people because these people were white people. And it's like, yeah, but you do realize that when you talk about the ancient world, you're talking about the Germanic separation, the Italian separation. And if you're going to make those movies, if you're going to make those things, you're going to have to separate these people. And those people do start making claim to parts of Europe that is not part of their part, just like people in Norse. They have nothing to do with the Italians. The people in Italia have nothing to do with the Norse and blah, 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 blah. But for some reason, they like to claim other people's stuff and look at themselves. Again, remember, this is a purity test thing, which they break in order to fit some mold. So if you go to Europe, they're very specific about who they are. Like, I'm Anglo-Saxon, I'm blah, 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 all this stupid stuff, right? And then when, all this important stuff. And then they say, they start to break it down. After that, they start to go, oh yeah, Western European. And then when that's not good enough, they go European. And then when that's not good enough, they go white. And then when that's not good enough, they say Caucasian. And then when it's not good enough, they say Caucasoid. When that's not good enough, they say, greater expansion, Indo-European, Aryan, all this other stuff, until they can claim every single place in the world and then nobody calls it out. And those people, those videos are everywhere. Nobody calls it out, except obviously Robert Saper, who they do call him out, but not for that part of it. His videos, they call him out for the evolution thing.
Right. Like, no one complains about white people claiming that history and having whole departments about the classics departments commemorating the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks, right? And in the ancient Greeks, no one complains about that. But as soon as a Black person, an African person commemorates ancient Egypt and, talks about how it is a part of the diaspora, it's a problem. And it's because those of you who don't understand the basics of colonization, invasion, are just perpetuating racism. Like, you're literally perpetuating anti-Blackness when you say that the native people of this African country are not Black.
Wait, we're not allowed to accuse them of racism because, of course, once you do that, they say, look, you guys like saying everything is racist. This is according to them. And when you say you guys and you ask them, what do you mean by you guys? Obviously, they mean Black people, even though Black people of different types accuse people in different ways. But okay, group us all together, I guess. So yeah, this is the cool thing about this video. And also, isn't it much better with her just talking without the music? I'm just saying.
Okay, so you know what? Don't listen to me. You can just listen to the indigenous people themselves. They have always been in mainland Egypt, unlike a lot of the other people who are descendants of Turks, Asians, Arabs, and Europeans. Okay? All right,
So like, share, subscribe. If you like this longer version of videos, I'm thinking about trying to make like 2-hour videos so I can fully explain, because sometimes I see that I have very important things that I put out there, and no, I don't mind if my video gets like 30 views or something like that. It doesn't bother me because the 30 who watch it are very interested in the information. I don't want to change it so that 30,000 people can watch, so that they can see something they always wanted to see. But please like, share, subscribe, and all of that so that we can continue to make these videos. So there's like 30 seconds left of this video, and I'm gonna play it because she addresses the troll in the chat.
with that said, if you have any questions, please let me know. And as for the troll right here, they were brown and looked and were same as Middle Eastern people. Yeah, the Middle Eastern people that are in mainland Egypt, which is in Africa, they don't originate from there. They migrated there. They're colonizers. They are not native. Okay. All right. So I'm about to be out.
Well, she was dealt with him real fast. Well, there you go.
I might display this video one more time because it gets really annoying. Like, people love to discredit me because they're like, "Oh, you're American, you can't talk about it." Now, from now on, I'm going to be highlighting some Egyptian voices on this topic. Okay? All right.
Thanks for watching.